Hey, this is Carl with Tabletop Tango, and I was looking at my campaign I've been running, my new campaign, and I realized there was a couple of times that almost went off the rails. I almost broke it. I did something wrong, and I thought maybe I'd share it to see if that helps anyone else out, or maybe you can just say, yeah, that happened to me too, and commiserate with me a little bit.
Adventure and intrigue. Fighting monsters out of our league. We'll roll the dice and pray they're nice. A +2 and I might succeed.
So, I'm Carl, again with Tabletop Tango. If you like what you see, like, subscribe. We would love to see the numbers go up. We know we're not going to be famous or anything, but it'd be cool anyway. So let's talk about this campaign that I almost broke a couple times. First, just as a background, I have a couple videos on creating my new campaign, and this is the one where the players are essentially new gods. They're just becoming gods. They're just exploring their powers, and it's in a cyberpunk kind of setting where they're in a dystopian future where even though they're gods and they have great power, remember the weapons of this era is also great, and so there is a threat to them. So they've got embroiled in trying to figure out how there's maybe another pantheon of gods that's doing something kind of contrary to the law, or trying to kind of mess with people, steal things, whatever. And they've been kind of contracted in a couple of different gigs. And each one of those gigs have led to kind of piecing together that there's sort of this broader conspiracy of another set of gods. So how did I screw it up? Well, first thing is I had an adventure where they were going against sort of these interests that people had, where there was two parties. There's the folks that are hiring, which is the bad guys they're looking for, and then there was this group of thugs, gang members that were being hired. And in between them, I had this group that was sort of a secretive organization that their whole job was to broker this so that the buyer and the seller never needed to know each other, and this group would be the only ones who kind of would link it. So to quiet them down, the gods decided to come and wipe out this secret organization, something you just should not do. It's completely unheard of. Think of that John Wick kind of thing. So they did that and they killed him. So what was the mistake? The mistake was I forgot that my players are gods. Duh. And one of them has resurrection. And so the big bad, or not the big bad, but the guy who runs this organization, he was killed. And the whole point was there's a mystery of who did it and how does that lead back. And there's some computer files, there's some stuff, whatever, to lead them in the right direction. But they just said, well, we'll just resurrect the guy because he just died, and we'll just ask him who his client was. So I almost completely, they took me off the rails. I do a lot of sort of on the fly ad lib GMing. I do low prep. I've got a video about low prep GMing too. So I have to think on the fly, and it was like, well, maybe he doesn't really know his client. What does that mean if he doesn't know his client? And so I came up with this concept of having a USB key that has the client information, and you can only look at it. You can't, store it, remember it, sort of a one-time use. And that the bad guys, it had already been established that, to make sure this proxy works right and nobody double crosses the folks who work for this guy's organization, who do the escrow type thing, or doing the in-between, they've got something implanted in them that explodes if they go against the wishes of the organization, sort of to keep them in line, keep them in check, make sure they double cross. So then I went, oh, you know what, he's got one of those for his memory, so it wipes out his memory so that he cannot link who hires him with who's on his team. Was that a cop-out? Yep. So what way I could have handled it? I also could have handled it by just letting it happen. They were smart enough to figure it out, have that guy point to the bad guy, skip a couple of steps in the way. No problem. Should have just done it. That would have been a yes and. Didn't do that. Probably should have, I think, in hindsight. But so what did I do? So what was the lesson? You got to remember that what your players' powers are, what their capabilities are. There's always this saying that, you don't play the player's character. They need to know what their character does. But in this case, I didn't know enough to understand where there would be a pitfall for me if I didn't keep track of it. So know enough of your players' powers and abilities so that you can make sure you're tailoring what you're doing, and that that you can sort of bob with the punches. I don't know, roll with the punches. That would be the saying. So that was the first thing. Second thing that happened is that the players were being pulled in. They had this key that they wanted to now decrypt so they could find out who the big bad guy is, who's doing this work, who hired them. And so what I did is I dropped right in their lap sort of a bank heist that happened. A couple of folks came in, just blew the heck out of a bank right in the middle of the day, destroyed the lobby. That was all a ruse so that they could get access to the internal computer systems, sort of at, getting everybody off guard instead of trying to hack in. They just got a physical connection by going through this means. And the players were hired to figure out what's going on. $1 trillion was stolen by taking, these blockchain, using the headlines, but these blockchain encrypted transactions, and then they wiped them from the system. So they're the only ones who had this piece of information. And now the players go, hey, we got to find these guys before they decrypt it. They get this money and they completely mess up the world's economy or what have you. So they went and they looked at surveillance footage. They interrogated people, or I shouldn't say interrogated. They had conversations with the guards, and they came to this conclusion by looking at video and doing things that there was some gods who came in and did this, and they saw 3 people in their non-god form, and then they saw in the videotape these gods before the videotape went blank from whoever it was who was controlling that, so that nobody could see it. Again, gods versus gods. They're able to figure out this tape stuff that maybe a normal mortal couldn't. Our hacker god, and so they pieced this together, and they know that these 3 people are probably gods in their human form. And so they called a contact to have them run it through the police database, because one of the players was, an old police person, and he figured he could use a contact there, run it through facial recognition, and, somebody's going to come up, because obviously, we're in dystopian future where there's a lot of pictures of people, there's a lot of databases and all that sort of thing. Didn't anticipate that. Again, probably should have. They're going to call the contact, but I thought they would more sort of piece together what was going on from these people, look at wider area of the cameras, and then see where these guys went, and that would lead them onwards. So I decided, well, maybe I need to kind of push that a little bit. And so I just offhand said, well, you do get recognition. One of the persons get recognized. I didn't want to have them recognize all the bigger, badder, the guy who's running the whole thing was there, but he's not in a facial recognition database, because it turns out, he's kind of an uber corporate captain guy who's never run into the law. And, those guys get special treatment compared to, the normal citizens. But there had to be something, because it was a great idea. And so I just mentioned out of hand that, there was a security forces, one of these corporate security forces guys, because their faces would be in the database of the police. So now I had that, and I figured that was just, hey, I had already set up that some of these corporate guys were working, or some of the muscle that was being hired. Well, the players went, oh, that means that this security force is the bad guy. The security force is the one who's behind the scenes doing all the bad deeds. The people who work for them must be the ones who are responsible for it. So what I ended up doing is, oops, I threw a red herring at the players. I completely did not mean to do that. I just wanted them to, see that there was a tie to this group that was being hired to do things. And maybe this person was, involved in hiring them, but I did not mean for them to go and say, oh, that must be the group. So what did I do? Well, they followed this guy's lead. They knew where he lived because all this information. And what I did is I presented a diary. He hadn't been to his place in a long time because he had turned to a god and moved on. So I presented a diary, and in that diary kind of led to how he was recruited by the big bad, and, the guy who's running the organization, and he's one of his, trusted allies, and he's part of that pantheon. But that pointed to that other person, and it pointed to, how he met them. So now I kind of been able to tie in who or what company this person works for, or why they're doing what they're doing. And then it pointed towards where that person lived, and what they were trying to accomplish. All that then tied back to the heist, because they decided that's probably where they're keeping all this information. They staked it out. They saw that there was hacker guys coming in and out. And so they went after the penthouse of this corporate captain, and that's where they found everything. They found the key. They solved that problem. So what did I learn? Sometimes you got to watch out for those throwaway lines because the characters are going to jump on them. We know that as game masters. We know that one NPC who's a throwaway NPC turns into the person they love, and they want to have them in the party, and they want to travel with them. It happened. The most important thing was take that and say, okay, great. This is who they're latching onto. Let's make that person part of the story. Let's make them a bigger part of the story. So suddenly they became an important god in this pantheon who now is the right-hand man as opposed to just a minion or something like that. So I learned that. Learned again. We learn it all the time. Watch out for those, throwaway lines. And so now we've solved a couple of problems, and now they're coming and they're returning this information to sort of the one of the operatives of the bad guy, because they knew that they had attacked. They had contacted them. They had tried to get this information back and make a deal. And so the players thought, yeah, we'll go make that deal, but that'll give us a chance to get in and find out who's really at the head of it, because they don't know quite yet. They know he's a corporate captain. They know he's working for this particular company, but they don't know that turns out he's like the head of the company. He is the CEO. They don't know that yet, or they're working that out. They may have had an inkling, but now they're really going to show it. So they go to this kind of the entryway of a big corporate building. They're in the lobby. They're doing the handoff, and they see the bad guy watching them, taunting them from afar. And then he gets into an elevator and he goes. My assumption was they were going to say, okay, there's the guy. Let's go see if we can attack him. Let's go see if, maybe not attack, but let's go follow. Let's figure out a way to kind of get in there and take care of him. Nope. They said, hey, we just finished our bank job. We got money. Let's do some downtime. Let's work on our, home base. That guy will wait. We'll come back to him. So another lesson is you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So I'm going to have to come up with something that pulls them in that direction again, that makes them want to go and take that next step, and look at that person again in depth and follow him, or how do I get them now to his lair is the question. The lair was right there. They just had to kind of reach out and follow him or figure out that, but now I got to pull them in. That's the problem I have now. That's what I'm working on in my new campaign, is now to get the players from part A to part B, while giving them a chance to do what they want, which is to make their base cooler and do some sort of that. So maybe the time is to throw another adventure at them that's a paying gig, that again draws them in. Maybe they didn't do anything, so the world moves on. His next step with a plan he's going to do because the players didn't stop him. Lots of stuff to think about there. So that's what I got to do next. So I learned a bunch of lessons that I've already knew, so they're not really lessons, but I thought I'd share them. Maybe you can just say, hey, yep, I've done that a million times before. I've had to fix that. Maybe you say, oh, yeah, that's a good thing. I should think about that. So watch out for those red herrings. You can't force the players to do things you want them to do. And watch out for those throwaway lines or throwaway NPC or just a throwaway that you think is nothing. And that's the thing they're going to latch onto. Be prepared to build that out for them, and make it the reality of the world. So anyway, I'm Carl Davis with Tabletop Tango. Thank you again for watching. I hope you liked it. If you like, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and we will talk to you next time. Thank you much.
Adventure and intrigue, fighting monsters out of our league. We'll roll the dice and pray they're nice. A +2 and I might succeed.